Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 4, Mugato Gumato, I believe, or whatever such thing. Anyway, this video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 2, Episode 4, if you haven't seen up to this point. You will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So this episode was a basic, your very stereotypical sitcom-esque episode. Not terrible, but not great either. It's funny because coming into season 2, I talked about how everyone was hyping it up as this is going to be the best season ever. It's going to be even better than season 1. It's going to really be this amazing season. It's going to bring the show to new heights. So far, we had episode 1, which was just like a typical, very stereotypical average season 1 episode, so it was no different. Then there was episode 3, which the A plot was okay. A plot was actually pretty good. The B plot was dumb, and the C plot almost ruined the damn show for me. It was so horrible. And then there's this episode, which is just, it's just your average sitcom. So outside of episode 2, which actually was all the hype that we're building up to, that was like a great step forward for Lower Decks. But outside of that episode seemed to be the only exception. Outside of it, I haven't been impressed with season 2 so far. It's just seemed just the same as season 1. More the average part. I would say the first half of season 1, which was more average than the end. So it seems like outside of episode 2, which is looking like an anomaly because it's the only episode out of 4 that was actually really good. Outside of that episode, haven't been really impressed with this season so far. So now getting into this episode specifically, now we get a Boimler and Rutherford team up, which is interesting because they're switching up the groups, which I like, because that was one of my biggest complaints of season 1, is that Rutherford and Tendi went off together on their side adventure. In fact, they did that in episode 1, which is part of the reason why I say episode 1 felt like a typical season 1 episode. But since then, they've been switching it up. Last week we had Tendi and Mariner, which was really fun. That pairing really worked for me. And this week we had Boimler and Rutherford. Now, I do like the pairing. However, I will say, last week when they did Tendi and Mariner together, they made all these jokes about how they didn't really know. In fact, the whole plot was about how they didn't really know each other. And they did a lot of jokes about how we never get paired up, and sort of doing meta commentary on the fact that Tendi's always with Rutherford, and we never get a Mariner Tendi pairing. So they harped on that maybe a little too much. Where this week, I feel like they did the exact opposite. They acted like Boimler and Rutherford were best of pals, and they knew each other very well, and they always hung out. When in fact, this is the first time we really seen them hanging out together. So I wish they would have went more down the middle, because I agree, I don't want them harping on the same thing, because they already did it last week. If they did it again this week about, we don't know each other, how come we never hang out? That would just be really repetitive, because we already went through that last week. In fact, maybe a bit too much. But I needed a happy medium. I needed something in between, though. They don't have to call attention to the fact that Boimler and Rutherford don't hang out the way they did last week, because we already did it. But don't act like they're best friends that know each other very well. There's a medium in between those two extremes that I think this storyline could have met, and it would have worked a lot better for me, rather than, we're the best of pals, even though we've never seen these two hang out together by themselves. They're always in the guys with, Tendi and Mariner, and usually they don't have that much to say of each other. But that being said, it was a good pairing. I think they harped on the fact that their nerdiness a bit too much. The opening scene where they did the I can't even remember what it's called, but this made up martial arts thing that was taken from Next Generation Season 2 episode Icarus Factor, which was a terrible episode. In fact, I kind of made fun of it for this like weird sport where Riker fights his dad and they would let out some steam. I always thought that was dumb. Anyway, it's kind of, if they're going to bring it back in the Star Trek, lore text is the correct medium to do that because it makes fun of it, and this should be made fun of. However, I didn't really like how Mariner just, and that, I know that's the point, that's the whole gag of the episode, is that Mariner beat the ever-loving shit out of Rutherford and Boimler. Now, Boimler I could buy, but Rutherford, like, he's been shown to be pretty badass, especially with his cybernetic implants. We've seen, like, in the, I think, the second episode of the entire show, we saw him, like, really kick ass, and like, Shax wanted him on the security team because he was such a badass fighter. So, why is he getting his ass kicked by Mariner? This seems to be, like, a whole Mariner being a Mary Sue thing. Now, I know the episode actually tries to address that a little bit, but they address it by making it worse at the start. So, yeah, I wasn't liking that. To be honest, I think that was making Mariner a bit too much of a superwoman, of an invincible, if you prefer those terms. Too much of a, let's call her Thanos problem, or Superman problem, or Wesley Crusher problem, where they're just too good. Anyway, so then we get into the storyline where the bartender says, "Oh, she's Black Ops," and this is where the cliche sitcom stuff comes in. This seems, I don't know, like, it seems like shows like Rick and Morty is above this kind of cliche sitcom stuff, and it seems for the most part Lower Decks has been above this kind of thing too, where it's like, it's the typical gag where the two characters, like, won't talk to each other, and all this could be cleared up if they simply talk to each other, and they think that someone is something that they're not, and it's kind of reinforced through misunderstandings, like such as they see Mariner stabbing Shax. Oh my God, she is a secret agent. Of course, he had poison. She was trying to cure him. Whatever. It's that this very cliche sitcom stuff by the numbers, which I don't think is terrible, but it's kind of it can only go so far in my mind. It's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, some of the details and specific jokes are funny, like the bartender guy. How he goes like this deep dark shadow every time he mentions it, and then they go back to light, and I'm like, hey, like, that was a funny gag. And as I said, I like the Boimler and Rutherford pairing. But yeah, the whole misunderstanding thing was pretty dumb. And then, like, when they realized that Mariner, realizes what's going on, said that she just made it up, and then the Rutherford and I did kind of like, actually, the ending when Rutherford and Boimler showed up with, like, this big, looked like a big rifle, and the Frank like, oh my God, Starfleet, and like, it was just like a projector that showed, like, all these graphs, and like, well, actually, here's how you increase your profit margin, blah blah blah. And so they used their smarts to get out of the situation, which is fine. But again, Rutherford actually is a badass fighter. But, again, this episode's retconning that. Hopefully that doesn't stick, though. But it's retconning it in order to have this contrived plot. But whatever. I still found that a funny moment, though. That's how they got out of it. And Mariner was kind of cheering them along with that, so it's kind of strengthening the friendship with her and whatnot, and so that was good. But then when they were playing that diplomacy game, and they're like, "Oh, you don't understand this at all," and then she goes to get a drink, like, "Oh my God, how's she kicking her ass so much?" Oh, let's not tell her. Again, that reinforced that. I won't use that term. Let's say the Wesley Crusher or Thanos. A mentality of her that she's so perfect and can't do anything wrong. So I didn't like that that joke either because of it. It just seems off. Like, it's getting back to my complaint on last week's C plot, which I'm not going to rehash that, but the point is, the show seems to be just having disregard for everything that came before it, and disrespect as far as last week's episode goes. So this seems more along these lines. That's just forgetting about the fact that fucking Rutherford is supposed to be a badass fighter, but whatever. And, you know, speaking of Shax, we see him in this episode, and again, it's hard for me to take him seriously because, I mean, and people are making a big deal out of why is Keyshawn, because we saw Keyshawn there in Tendy's storyline. People making a big deal about, oh, why is Keyshawn still there if Shax is back? I don't care, because the show, it lost. I don't take the show seriously at all anymore. It lost all sense of logic and respect after the whole Shax coming back for no goddamn reason. So I don't even fucking care why they're both. Sure, yeah, have 2 security officers, have 3, have 4. Nothing matters anymore that he can just come back for no reason. I don't care. Anyway, so then there's the Mugato, the whole Mugato thing. They're these animals that appeared in an episode of the original series, A Private Little War. Now, to be fair, I haven't seen that episode in a very long time because I don't like it. And so I never paid much attention. I'm not sure what the deal with this creature. I'm sure it's just some random alien, you know, some guy in a college mascot costume showing up to go roar. So it's just some random alien creature, and that all it is to it. So I wasn't like, oh, it's those things. How awesome is that? And I remember seeing in the preview, I was like, hey, isn't that thing from that bad original series episode? But anyway, so yeah. I did like their use in this episode. That whole storyline with them tracked. It made sense for me, and it made sense it would be kind of mission that the Cerritos would go on to do, like animal patrol and whatnot, and that to conservation or whatever, and we find out they're being exploited by the Ferengi. I think is a good use of the Ferengi, although it doesn't really go in line with the retrofitted new age Ferengi era that Rom was supposed to usher in at the end of Deep Space Nine. This is taking place after that, but they do address that in the episode with Mariner saying, oh, you're those last outposts kind of throwbacks, which she gives the name of a Next Generation episode title. And again, it's like that, you know, it's a comedy show. I'm willing to go with it. They don't try to make an in-universe excuse like these old scientists kind of thing. She just threw out the name of Next Generation episode title, but whatever. And you could tell that they weren't going around going, Mordok, but they were dressed like them and they were acting a bit more primitive. And it is interesting that she even said, haven't you heard of Quark? And they're like, oh, of course I've heard of Quark. And I was hoping that they were going to further, like, how did this Ferengi know the name of Quark? What does he know about Quark? What's the interesting? But then, like, they get distracted and they move on, so it's just like a little joke. But I mean, it makes sense that even in the new age of progressive Ferenginess, that there would still be some throwback Ferengis who would still be going by the old ways, because it happened really fast. So that I'm fine with, and I actually like the joke of the last Outpost Ferengis. Kind of addressed that. And of course that they were able to sort of progress when Rutherford and Boimler showed them how they could be making more profits. They ended up, let's have an animal sanctuary and take care of the animals because it will make us more money. Which, I don't know, that's kind of the misguided philosophy of free market capitalism, which I actually don't think is realistic. But I'm not going to get into those politics here. But it is a way for them to, if they can make money by doing that, then sure. And to clarify, I'll just clarify that statement. But what I mean is, the philosophy of free market capitalism. Oh, people wanting to make more money is going to be better for society, and if something's going to benefit society, then if you make it profit motivated, then they'll do it to earn profit, which actually isn't the case, because sometimes people can earn profit by destroying the environment, and so if everything's profit motivated, it's actually not always going to be better for society. So that's, just get that out of the way. That's what I meant. Anyway, and so they're kind of perpetuating that myth here by saying, oh, it just so happens the way they can make the most profits is by actually, preserving the animals and treating them nice, which I think is a bit unrealistic. But I do like at this point for the Ferengi that when they do see a way to make more money, that they'll do it, because they are profit motivated. And so that part of it I like. That made sense for the characters. And we got like the probably most trashy scene that we had in Lower Decks up to date, because usually they avoid this kind of over the top sex humor that like shows like say Rick and Morty do all the time. But we got that with the Mugato's mating scene, which it was funny. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but it was just, I'm just not a huge fan of that kind of humor. I mean, it was funny when the third one showed up and they thought they were going to challenge him, but they're like, oh, he just wants to watch. Like, it was a bit trashy, but I don't know. That was kind of subverting of expectations. I thought was kind of funny in that regard. Anyway, we get a side plot with Tendi, which is a very throwaway. Like, this is the kind of side plot that Tendi and Rutherford used to go on all the time, but this time they just give it to Tendi. That doesn't make it any better. It's still really uninteresting. Not funny at all, really. Like, she has to track down all these people and scan them. Like, I don't know. I didn't really find it. It was really boring. I didn't really find it really funny at all. I mean, the only thing I kind of liked was that one dude who was like, "No, I'm too busy, and he went to the bar to hit a girl. And they talked about, and Tendi was like, "Oh, you have brittle bones. I don't, blah blah," and he just cracked his bone. Like, that was funny. It showed kind of making fun of that kind of person. But other than that, like the whole thing with the doctor, I can never remember her name, but the cat lady, where she refused to get her. It was kind of obvious that she was going to be the last person in that fight. I kind of liked the fight just because I thought it was funny that she was really acting like a cat, like in the way they really been playing out the past couple episodes, that she's basically just a cat, and she's like the way that she hisses and runs and scurries and hides, and Tendi was kind of chasing her the way you would chase a cat. But other than that, yeah, it was kind of just a throwaway side plot that didn't really seem to need to be there. But more than that was, we got a few brief scenes with that one dude who was, the buyer who was on the planet who tried to flee in the shuttle, and the Cerritos like tracked to beam him, and the shuttle fell apart, and they were trying to compensate him for it. And then Freeman at the end of the episode was talking to her husband, and she's like, "Oh, be aware, there's a con man running a scam." And then so she figured it out and took her shuttle back and whatever. That plot, those scenes it just seemed like filler. Like, I think they were short on runtime for the episode. They had nothing else to do. It's like, oh, well, we have this character of this buyer. Let's just use him. Like, because the whole thing it was not funny. It wasn't interesting. It really didn't need to exist at all. Like, I don't know why they did it. Maybe, let's give Freeman something to do this episode. I don't know. It seemed really dumb to me, and it's because I just watched this Voyager episode about where that also had a side plot with this con man that seemed really unnecessary. So seeing it again, like, just because I watched it just last night, so seeing it back to back with this one, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know why they did this. Speaking of random unnecessary things, what about that one dude who showed up who was like a crocodile hunter-esque, except he was supposed to be an expert on the Mugato. It's like, oh, be quiet, I know how to handle this, and it turns out he was just a moron, didn't know anything about it, and he got his head bitten off. I don't know. That seemed completely unnecessary. Like, what's the point? I could see how it was supposed to be like some sort of random joke. Like sometimes these animated cartoon shows just have someone randomly show up and then immediately get killed or go away or something as a joke. But this one didn't work for me. It seemed kind of pointless. I didn't really see the point of him. He seemed to come out of nowhere and then he left right away. So why even bother? I don't know. So anyway, my rating for Mugato Gumato or whatever, Mugato Gumato, out of 10 is a 6. Good. I mean, this episode it's fine. I mean, it's just a cliche sitcom. There are some funny moments in it, but yeah, it's not the great Lower Deck season 2 I was looking forward to. But whatever. Anyway, that is it for my review for this latest episode of Lower Decks. I shall be back next week and every week after to continue to cover Lower Decks and also cover other shows on my channel, such as all other Star Trek kind of things, as well as shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, Star Wars, Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.